They said time would pass, that the lights of Oakland and San Francisco would one day fade. But what if time had only changed shape? Because while half of the NBA talks about rebuilding, the Golden State Warriors still talk about legacy. The team that redefined modern basketball is back in the arena with something different in their eyes. Older, wiser, more pressured, but still dangerous. Very dangerous. The arrival of a legendary veteran. Trade rumors that could change the franchise's destiny. And the question every fan feels but rarely admits. Does this team still have enough left for one more title run? The 2025 season promises to be one of the most emotional and perhaps the most symbolic of the Stephen Curry era. Because for the first time in a decade, Golden State seems torn between the past it built and the future that refuses to arrive. And in the middle of this dilemma, one name resurfaces. A veteran warrior who comes to bring balance, but who also carries the weight of time. A center who was once the heart of historic defenses. Now trying to be the mind of a team in transformation. But will this gamble work? Or are we witnessing the final great chapter of a legendary dynasty trying to reinvent itself? Leave a like, subscribe, and comment what you think, because this space is ours. Here we talk basketball with emotion, with truth, and with the soul of those who live the game. Because what comes next changes everything. News 1. When the Golden State Warriors announced the signing of Al Horford, the reaction was quiet. There were no fireworks, no screaming headlines. But behind the scenes of the NBA, the keenest eyes saw the weight of this move. It wasn't just another signing. It was a signal. The dynasty that turned basketball into art for a decade was now taking a different step. The step of those who still want to fight, but know they can't run like before. Time demands its due, even from the immortal. And in San Francisco, time is knocking. At 39, Al Horford arrives at Chase Center with a mission that goes beyond basketball. He's not here to be a star or to stack numbers. He's here to bring balance, to hold together a structure that, as brilliant as it seems, is starting to crack. Steve Kerr knew that, and he made it clear from day one. Horford will not play on back-to-back nights. None. It's non-negotiable. The decision was made together with the player and Rick Celebrini, the Warriors' performance guru. The plan is clear. Look at the schedule a week in advance. Choose the battles he fights and the ones he rests. It might sound cautious, but it makes sense. At 39, Horford is the fourth oldest player in the NBA. His body no longer recovers the same way. But his mind, his positioning, his reading of the game, still among the best in the league. Stephen Curry and Jimmy Butler understood that immediately. In interviews, both praised the veteran's arrival, highlighting how he thinks the game and keeps the defense organized. But the sharp-eyed fan hears the subtext. The Warriors are aging. And that sentence, which years ago would have sounded like an insult, now rings as fact. Horford's contract, 2 years, $11.6 million, might very well be his last. And he knows it. That's why he chose Golden State. Because if the journey is ending, it should end alongside those who understand the weight of victory. In a locker room where the silence before tip-off still means what it did in 2015. But the schedule is brutal. Golden State has one of the most back-to-backs in the league, 16. That means Horford will miss at least 8 games. And 8 games might not sound like much, but in a Western Conference filled with monsters, 8 games can separate the 4th seed from the play-in zone. Without Horford, Kerr will have to rely on young players still learning how to survive. Tracy Jackson-Davis, for example, explosive, athletic, full of energy but raw. Quinton Post, the European rookie, skilled, but too light physically to handle giants like Jokic or Gobert. The plan is simple. Horford as starter, anchoring the defense, helping Draymond Green maintain the structure, Jackson-Davis bringing energy and speed, Post being molded gradually. But simple plans rarely survive the chaos of an 82-game season. And there's another factor heavier than any stat. The cap. The Warriors' salary cap is suffocating. Curry, Butler, Green, and Kuminga eat up nearly all of it. What's left is the minimum. And that minimum had to be used with surgical precision. That's how DeAnthony Melton and Gary Payton II arrived. And that's how Seth Curry had to leave. Yes, Seth, Steph's brother. A symbolic and painful cut. The kind of decision that shows the Golden State of today is no longer the same as in its glory days. It's a team forced to make pragmatic choices, and each one costs a piece of its soul. Behind closed doors, there's a quiet understanding. The Warriors are trying to hold the castle together with duct tape. Nick San Miguel from Blue Man Hoop recently wrote that the bench could be the team's undoing. And he might be right, because when Kerr has to rest his veterans, and he will, the weight will fall on the shoulders of youngsters like Podziemski, Kuminga, and Moses Moody. They are the future. But in Golden State, the future doesn't have time to wait. Kerr knows that better than anyone. He's tried to achieve the impossible balance, keeping the competitive flame alive without burning his veterans in the process. That's why Horford is more than a center. He's an idea. He embodies a concept of controlled survival. It's ironic. Years ago, Joel Embiid took a similar approach, skipping back-to-backs to preserve his body. But Embiid was in his prime. Horford is at the end. The difference changes everything. Still, it's hard not to admire the calm with which he faces this new phase. In Boston, he already proved he knew how to age gracefully within the game. He played fewer minutes but had greater impact, spoke less but was heard more. And now in San Francisco, he's doing the same, guiding, positioning, teaching. Reports from practices are clear. Horford is the first to arrive and the last to leave. He talks to Jackson Davis about defensive positioning, gives Kuminga tips on reading pick and rolls, and even works with Curry on adjusting the rhythm between shot and rebound. Tiny details, things that don't show up on box scores, but win playoff games. And that's why Kerr wanted him, because Golden State has always been about more than talent. It's been about discipline, collective intelligence, the understanding that basketball is a symphony, and every instrument has to hit its note at the right time. Still, a ghost hovers over the season. Exhaustion, age, doubt, because Horford needs rest, Curry needs load management, and Butler lives on the edge physically. Who carries the load when all of them sit at once? That's where the risk lies. That's where the castle starts to shake. According to ESPN's Kevin Pelton, the Warriors are projected to win 56 games, an optimistic, almost generous projection. But that number depends on something the NBA rarely grants: health. If Curry, Horford, Butler, and Green play 65 games together, the team will have consistency. But if one of them goes down, the balance collapses. And amid it all, there's a human factor. The connection. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, this is the last great dance of this group. The last run of Curry. The last rotation of Horford. The last war cry of Draymond Green. Every time Al Horford steps on the court, fans feel time passing. But they also feel something deeper. Respect for the game. Because while many chase stats, he chases purpose. And that's what defines the 2025 Golden State Warriors. A team that once had everything, lost a bit, and now is trying to prove to itself that it still has enough. Because legacy isn't always about winning again. Sometimes it's about continuing to fight even when the body says you can't. And that's where Horford fits perfectly. He is a Warrior's reflection. Old, tired, but still with fire in his eyes. But what if I told you that the move that could truly change the franchise's future isn't this one? What if what's coming involves a young star, a player from Miami, and a trade that could put Golden State back on top of the NBA? Because if Horford's arrival was about experience, the next chapter is about rebirth. News, too, rumors. They always start like that. A tweet, a piece of speculation, a journalist who heard from sources close. But when the name Stephen Curry appears in any trade headline, the whole world stops to listen. It was Mark DeLucci of SB Nation who dropped the bomb on October 21st. A hypothetical exercise, or maybe not so hypothetical after all, in which the Golden State Warriors would send Jonathan Kuminga, Buddy Hield, and 2 first-round picks, 2026 and 2028, to the Miami Heat in exchange for Tyler Herro. At first glance, it seems like one of those off-season ideas that fuel forums and bar debates. But the more you look at it, the more it makes sense. Because Herro is exactly the kind of player the Warriors have been searching for since Kevin Durant left. A pure scorer with a killer instinct who can play alongside Curry or replace him when needed. And that's where things get interesting. Golden State lives in a paradox. They still have the greatest shooter of all time, the same coach, the same philosophy, but they lost the creative chaos that Durant brought. Since 2019, Curry has carried the offense almost alone. His old companions, Klay Thompson, Andre Iguodala, are gone. Draymond Green remains, but he's the brain, not the finishing arm. Jimmy Butler arrived to bring intensity, but he's not the kind of player who changes offensive rhythm. And that's why the idea of Tyler Herro sounds tempting. Herro is a pure scorer, 25 years old. He plays with rhythm, confidence, and that rare trait, the instinct to score when the clock is dying. Over the past 3 years in Miami, he's averaged around 21 points per game, 39% from 3, and over 4 assists. He's not just a hot hand shooter, he's a shot creator, something the Warriors haven't had since Durant. Now imagine the scene. Stephen Curry and Tyler Herro sharing the backcourt. 2 players who can play with or without the ball. 2 who stretch defenses to the limit. 2 who force every matchup to collapse. Kerr already sees on the board. Curry coming off a green screen, receiving from Herro. Herro cutting inside when the defense doubles Steph. Butler driving on the opposite side, Horford spacing the floor. It's ordered chaos. The choreography that once made the Warriors immortal. But every move has a price. And this one's price has a name, Jonathan Kuminga. The kid is the symbol of the new Golden State generation. Explosive, athletic, still developing, but with sky-high potential. To many, trading him now would mean giving up the future for an uncertain present. But Curry's present doesn't wait. And that may be the most delicate point in the entire equation. Curry is in the twilight of his career. He still plays at an MVP level, but time is running out. And he knows it. Every season now is a race against the clock. Every title window narrower than the last. So the question echoing through the Chase Center halls is simple. How far are the Warriors willing to go to give Curry one last shot at glory? Trading Kuminga for Herro is an all-or-nothing gamble. Herro brings instant talent, playoff experience, and a mindset that fits the Warriors' DNA. But Kuminga represents youth, energy, and future potential. The trade is literally a mirror of the franchise's dilemma. Continue or restart. And on the other side, the Miami Heat. Pat Riley is a master at repositioning his team without ever completely dismantling it. But with Jimmy Butler aging and Bam Adebayo as a lone pillar, the trade makes sense. Acquiring Kuminga, Buddy Hield, and 2 first-rounders offers a chance to rebuild around youth and flexibility. For the Heat, it's a door to the future. For the Warriors, it's a desperate bet on the present. DeLucci wrote in his article that trading Kuminga, Hield, and 2 first-round picks for Herro would give Steph his most dynamic teammate since Kevin Durant. And he's right. Herro isn't Durant, but he's as close as Golden State can get right now, considering the market and salary cap. With Herro, the Warriors' starting 5 would be Curry, Herro, Butler, Draymond Green, and Al Horford, a balanced, experienced lineup full of tactical intelligence and offensive power. And the bench, with Podziemski, Moody, Melton, Jackson Davis, Quentin Post, and Payton II, would sustain the rotation. In theory, it looks ideal, but in practice, the questions start piling up. How would Kerr handle 2 similar offensive profiles, Curry and Herro, sharing the same creation zone? How would he maintain defensive balance with 2 guards who aren't specialists? And most importantly, would the locker room accept losing Kuminga, a beloved, charismatic kid who symbolized a bridge between generations? These are questions that don't show up on trade machine reports, but they're the ones that decide a season's fate. And there's more. Herro is a player who needs a ball in his hands. So does Curry. Kerr's challenge will be reinventing the offense, perhaps sacrificing some collective flow that defined the Warriors for a decade. But if anyone can orchestrate a complex attack, it's Kerr. And if anyone can share the spotlight, it's Curry. The idea of having Herro as plan B in case of a Steph injury also matters. In a long season with veterans needing rest, having someone who can lead the offense alone is gold. Herro did that in Miami, and did it well. Deep down, the reasoning is simple. If Golden State wants to give Curry one last run at a title, this is the kind of move they need to make. Not a big rebuild, not a draft promise, but a risky, immediate, high-impact swing. And the fans know it. They feel it. Every rumor, every headline comes with the same mix of fear and hope. Fear of losing the future, hope of reliving the past. The Warriors story has always been written with courage. It was like that when Kerr traded Bogut for Durant. It was like that when they gave up Mona Ellis for a rising young Curry. And maybe it will be like that again, because Herro represents more than stats. He represents belief that Golden State still believes, that there's still fight to be fought, that there's still time for one more dance under the lights. But the clock is ticking. And while the front office debates giving up Kuminga in the future, Curry keeps training. Draymond tweaks the defense. Horford manages his body. And Butler, the new warrior, watches in silence, waiting to see if this dynasty still has breath for one more miracle. And maybe it does. Maybe this unlikely, risky trade is what reignites the fire. Because in the end, great teams don't die of age. They die of fear to try again. And the Golden State Warriors have never been afraid. But there's still something no one's saying. Something beyond Horford, beyond Herro, beyond any rumor. A truth forming behind the scenes that could define what comes next. Because if the team truly goes all in for Curry, then what happens after could change the franchise's direction forever. What all this means for the team, the fans, and the legacy comes now in the closing chapter of the story. Perfect. So now, turn off the lights in the gym. Let the crowd noise fade, the echo of bouncing balls stop. Because what comes next isn't about contracts or stats. It's about meaning. It's about endings and new beginnings. It's about what the Golden Shield still stands for. The 2025 Golden State Warriors are a team between worlds. On one side, the past, brilliant, victorious, eternal. On the other, the future, uncertain, unstable, impatient. And in the middle, a generation trying to prove it can still defy time. The arrival of Al Horford is more than a roster move. It's a symbol. The veteran who accepts his body's limits to keep fighting. The leader who doesn't need to shout to be heard. A man who understands that sometimes being important isn't about being on the court all the time. It's about being present when the team needs to breathe. And while Horford represents wisdom, the possible arrival of Tyler Herro represents hunger. The new energy the Warriors desperately need. Youth mixed with experience. The daring talent that can reignite a flame that seemed to fade. On one side, the veteran living his final chapter. On the other, the young man eager to write his first. And at the center of it all, Stephen Curry, the man who changed the game. He stands there, looking around, seeing different faces but feeling the same weight. He knows it won't last forever. But he also knows that as long as there's a court, a ball, and a light above, he still has one last act to deliver. The 2025 Warriors are the perfect picture of transition. A team trying to do the impossible. Grow old without dying, change without losing its soul. And maybe that's what makes them so human. Because this roster, with Horford, Butler, Green, and Curry, is a living reminder of what basketball's most beautiful element really is: persistence. They're not here for numbers. They're here because they still believe they can win. Even tired, even doubted, even when the world has already moved on. And the fans feel it. Every possession is a scream stuck in the throat. Every Horford rest, a mix of tension and hope. Every trade rumor, a reminder that time runs fast. But also that the dream still exists. The future may bring changes. It may bring Herro, new faces, even the inevitable rebuild. But the legacy, no one can touch that. The legacy lives in the way Curry still smiles before shooting, in Draymond's stare before a decisive play, in Kerr's quiet gaze from the bench, watching his own creation reinvent itself, and in the heavy silence of the locker room, where every player knows they're fighting not just for wins, but for meaning. The 2025 Golden State is the kind of team numbers can't explain, because numbers don't measure character, they don't measure pain, and they definitely don't measure what makes a man keep going when his body begs him to stop. Maybe they won't win 56 games. Maybe they'll lose more than they should. But if there's still a playoff series, a chance, one last Curry shot, no one will want to face them. Because what drives this team isn't glory anymore. It's the memory of glory. And when that happens, when the heart starts playing, the impossible becomes possible again. And that's why the fans keep believing. Because the Golden Shield still stands for pride. Because blue and gold still make hearts race. Because the team may change, but the feeling never does. Leave a like, subscribe, and comment what you would do if you were in management's place. Would you trade Kuminga for Herro? Would you keep the roster as it is? Because this story, it's ours too. Every opinion, every criticism, every dream. It's all part of what keeps the Warriors alive. And when the lights go out and the gym falls silent, you can still hear the echo of an era that refuses to end. Because basketball, in the end, isn't just about who wins. It's about who still believes. And the Golden State Warriors still believe